All right, let's get right into it. Nigeria is in the middle of its biggest tax shakeup since 1999. We're talking a complete overhaul of the country's financial rulebook. And this is all happening while the economy is under some serious pressure, with inflation making everything more expensive. This isn't just a minor adjustment, it's a fundamental shift in how the government and its people deal with money. So, what's the big idea behind all this? Well, the government's official slogan for these changes is pretty catchy: tax the fruits, not the seeds. The thinking here is to shift away from taxing things like investment and production and instead focus more on profits and what people are actually spending. It sounds good on paper, but as you know, the real story is always in the details. And that really gets us to the heart of the matter, doesn't it? When all is said and done with this new system, who are the ones who will really benefit from it? And who's going to be left behind? Let's break it all down. Okay, first up, let's talk about the group that always seems to feel these economic shifts the most: the salaried urban middle class. For them, these new laws bring a couple of massive changes that are going to hit their bank accounts directly. Now, if you just glance at this table, you're probably thinking, hey, this looks pretty good. The amount you can earn tax-free is way up at 800,000 naira, and the rates for the next few brackets are actually lower. It looks like a tax cut, right? Well, not so fast, because your tax bill isn't just about the rate, it's about what part of your income they can actually tax. And here is the catch, and trust me, it is a huge one. The single biggest tax break for most workers in Nigeria, the Consolidated Relief Allowance, or CRA, well, it's been completely scrapped. Gone. This was the relief that shielded 20% of your total income from tax. Now, it's been replaced with this much smaller, much more specific rent relief allowance, which has a cap and, you guessed it, only helps you if you're a renter. This basically creates what we can call a homeowner penalty. If you own your own home, that massive 20% tax shield you used to have is just gone. Poof. All of a sudden, a huge piece of your income that was protected before is now completely exposed to tax. And let's put a real number on that to see the impact. Someone earning 10 million naira a year who owns their home. Under the old system, they had a tax-free allowance of 2.2 million naira, thanks to that 20% rule. Under the new law, that allowance is now zero. That one change pretty much wipes out any benefit from the new tax brackets for a huge slice of the middle class. But okay, that's just one side of the coin. While the middle class is definitely feeling the squeeze, these reforms are also throwing a major lifeline to two other groups: low-income earners and small businesses. Now, this is a really big deal. That new 800,000 naira tax-free threshold is a genuine game changer for Nigeria's lowest earners. It literally takes everyone earning minimum wage completely out of the income tax system. That's more money going directly into the pockets of the people who need it most. So who's the other big winner here? Small businesses. The new law is super clear about what it calls a small company: any business making less than 100 million naira a year. And if you fall into that category, the benefits are just massive. I mean, just look at this list. It's practically a dream for a small business owner. 0% income tax. You don't have to deal with charging VAT. You're exempt from withholding tax. This is basically a huge stimulus package meant to cut costs, reduce paperwork, and really encourage small businesses to grow. But there's a potential ticking time bomb hidden inside all these reforms, one that could end up hurting everyone and undermining all the good parts we just talked about. I'm talking about the new fuel surcharge. So here's what's happening. The new law adds a 5% surcharge right at the pump on both petrol and diesel. And unlike other taxes, this is one you're going to feel directly every single time you fill up your car or your generator. And here's why that's such a dangerous move. Think about it. Nigeria's entire economy moves on roads. When fuel costs more, transportation costs more. And when it costs more to move food from the farm or goods to the store, guess what? The price of everything goes up. It's a simple and very powerful chain reaction. And we don't have to just imagine how this could play out. We have a real-world example right next door. Look at what happened in Kenya. When they pushed through a similar fuel tax, it became the main driver behind massive cost of living protests. It's a serious warning about what can happen when you tax the one thing that powers the whole economy. So what's the bottom line here? This one 5% surcharge could unleash a new wave of inflation so big that it completely washes away the benefits that the low-income earners and small businesses were supposed to get from their tax cuts. So let's put all the pieces on the table. We have the squeeze on the middle class, a big stimulus for small businesses, and this looming threat of inflation. What does it all add up to? Well, the final verdict points to a very specific and divided future. Economists call this a K-shaped impact, and this slide shows it perfectly. Just picture the letter K. One arm is pointing up. Those are the winners. Low-income earners, small businesses, their situation is improving. But the other arm is pointing down. Those are the losers. The salaried middle class, homeowners, and pretty much every consumer facing higher prices. The reforms are creating two very different realities at the exact same time. Ultimately, whether this whole massive gamble pays off really comes down to two big what-ifs, two critical tests of the government's ability to get things right. First, can they actually manage that refunds well enough to help bring food prices down? And second, are they going to be smart enough to hold off on that 5% fuel tax until the current inflation problem gets under control? The fate of this entire reform package really hangs on these two questions. So, the laws are written. The stage is set for a radically different financial reality in Nigeria. But the one big question we're all left with is this. Will the people in charge actually execute this plan in a way that builds a stronger economy? Or are they about to accidentally trigger the very crisis they were trying to prevent? The first question on pretty much everyone's mind has to be why, right? Why tear down a system that's been around for years? A move this massive doesn't just happen on a whim. As we're about to see, Nigeria was staring down some pretty serious challenges and had some really ambitious goals it wanted to hit. And just to be clear, this wasn't some proposal or a white paper, this is the real deal. As you can see from the official notice, this is now the law of the land. We're talking about 4 major new acts, including the huge Nigeria Tax Act of 2025. This signals a really fundamental shift in how the nation plans to fund itself and grow its economy. And this slide, this really gets to the heart of why this all happened. The goals were super clear. First, untangle a system that had become way too complex. Second, actually use tax policy to fuel economic growth. And third, well, bring in more revenue to pay for all the things a country needs. At the end of the day, it's all about making Nigeria an easier and better place to do business. Okay, so let's start with the impact on businesses, because the reforms have really reshaped the corporate tax landscape in some pretty major ways. First up, the very definition of a small company has been completely rewritten. Just look at this. The turnover threshold quadrupled, jumping from 25 million to 100 million naira. I mean, this is a total game changer. It means a much, much larger group of small and medium-sized businesses are now exempt from both companies' income tax and capital gains tax. That is a massive boost for the SME sector. Now, for the medium and large companies, there's a new tax on the block. It's called the development levy, and it's set at 4% of a company's assessable profits. But wait, this isn't just another tax piled on top. It's actually a really clever move towards that goal of simplification we were just talking about. And this slide shows that simplification in action. 4 separate, kind of clunky levies for education, IT, science, and the police fund. They're all now rolled into this one single development levy. For businesses, this is great. It means less paperwork and a much more straightforward process. But there's a deeper strategy here too. By creating a single, powerful funding stream, the government is basically signaling a super focused investment in the core pillars of a modern economy. But it is not all tax cuts, not by a long shot. The capital gains tax rate for companies has seen a massive jump, tripling from 10% all the way up to 30%. The logic here is actually pretty straightforward. They wanted to align it with the main company's income tax rate. This makes it a lot less tempting for companies to try and classify their income as capital gains just to get a lower tax bill. Okay, so that's businesses, but this isn't just about corporations, right? These reforms have a very direct impact on individuals and, what actually ends up in your wallet at the end of the day. So the whole personal income tax system has been made more progressive. As you can see in this table, the tax-free threshold has been raised. So if you're earning 800,000 naira a year or less, you now pay 0 income tax. Zilch. For folks earning more, the rates climb up steadily, topping out at 25% for anyone earning above 10 million naira. This whole structure is really designed to ease the burden on lower income earners while asking those at the top to contribute a little bit more. And check this out. This is another really significant piece of relief for individuals. If you lose your job, the tax-free chunk of your severance pay has been increased by a whopping 400%, going from 10 million up to 50 million naira. This provides a much, much bigger financial cushion for people during what is, let's face it, a really difficult time. All right, now for what I think is a truly fascinating part of this whole reform. the move to properly tax the digital economy. I mean, this is a challenge governments all over the world are grappling with, and Nigeria is now taking some very clear, decisive steps to tackle it head-on. You see, to tax something, you first have to define it. And the new act does exactly that. It provides a clear, official definition for a virtual asset. And it's a really broad definition on purpose. It covers everything from cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin to all sorts of other digital tokens. This basically ensures the law is as future-proof as possible. So with that definition locked in, the law now makes a whole range of digital activities officially taxable. We're talking about selling or exchanging your crypto, any income you make from mining or staking, and even things like airdrops. The big takeaway here is that if you use a virtual asset to pay for something, it's now treated, for tax purposes, exactly the same as if you used traditional money. Okay, so you have all these new rules, but how do you actually enforce them? The final piece of this giant puzzle is a complete modernization of how tax is administered and how compliance is handled. This gives the authorities new tools, but it also gives taxpayers new protections. For the very first time, Nigeria is going to have a tax ombuds office. The best way to think about this is like an independent referee. If you have a dispute with the tax authority, you can now go to this office to get a fair hearing and hopefully resolve your complaint. This is a massive step forward for taxpayer rights. And on the technology front, e-invoicing is now mandatory for all businesses when it comes to that. This means transactions get recorded and reported electronically in real time through a government system. This move is all about improving transparency, cracking down on fraud, and just making that collection way more efficient. And make no mistake about it, these new laws have some serious teeth. The Tax Administration Act gives the authorities significant new powers to enforce the rules. As this official form shows, they now have the explicit authority to seize assets, we're talking goods, property, land, to recover unpaid taxes. The message is crystal clear. Compliance is not optional anymore. Okay, we've gone through a lot of details, so let's zoom out for a second and look at the big picture. When you put all these pieces together, what does this massive overhaul really mean for Nigeria? You know, when you connect all the dots, 4 major themes really stand out. First, there's a powerful drive towards simplicity and clarity. Second, there's a clear shift to asking more from corporations and high earners. Third, a huge leap into the modern era by finally getting to grips with the digital economy. And finally, a clear, unambiguous message. These new rules will be enforced. And that brings us to the ultimate question, doesn't it? The laws are ambitious, no doubt. They absolutely have the potential to transform Nigeria's economy. But as we all know, a law is only as good as its implementation. So will this be the game changer Nigeria is hoping for? Or is the real challenge, the hardest part, just beginning? That is the story we'll all be watching.